Tuesday, and welcome to the MSL Lead Chronicles. It's a podcast on a mission in medical affairs and leadership. I'm Mary Morton, and along with my buddy, Chad Fellers, we're going to have casual talk about important topics and challenges in leadership. So whether you want to elevate or further develop as a leader, or your ambition is to transition to a leadership role, you've tuned into the right podcast, and we are so glad you're here. Stay tuned. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to MSL Lead Chronicles. I am the hostess with the mostest, Mary Morton, joined by my buddy, Chad Fellers. Hey, Chad, how's it going?
Hey, how are you, Mary?
I asked you first.
Oh, I thought that was rhetorical. I mean, I'm the same. I'm better now that I'm with you, Mary. So how about that? How about you?
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. So if you're watching and not listening, you probably noticed we have like a little baseball theme here. If you're not watching, man, you're missing it because Chad's got on a pink jacket and a baseball cap backwards. So if you're only listening, you need to probably go and get on YouTube and watch it. And I have got on my Round Rock Express jersey from their little minor league team, where the Rangers, one of their top drafts from a few years ago, who was at Vanderbilt, he didn't start on the mound, but he pitched most of the game for Round Rock. So I think he's probably going to be moving up to the Texas Rangers here pretty soon.
That's awesome. And I do like, and those that aren't listening right now or watching, if you're watching, I hope you're listening as well too, by the way. But if you're not watching right now, you don't see Mary's jersey, what it says Dazed and Confused. I can promise the listeners that by the end of this conversation, you won't be dazed and confused. We know exactly what we're going to talk about today. When we're talking about the big M word, we're continuing the conversation, not M as in Mary, M as in metric is the focus today, right, Mary?
That is right. And so I was kind of thinking, since baseball season has just kicked off, and I've kind of started thinking about how there are a lot of parallels between tracking the statistics in baseball or KPIs and tracking the KPIs for MSLs. And so it made me think of the movie Moneyball, and the book came out in 2003. And, I was kind of thinking about how the numbers should have a story to tell. Should they be the whole story? Maybe that's one of the things we're going to dig into here a little bit. But like any good story, the numbers need some context. But anyway, I just happened to be in my Frisco office today and prominently featured in Moneyball, Ron Washington, because he was an infield coach for the Oakland A's during that time period. So I just thought I would point that out. He was Jason Giambi's coach when he was the first baseman.
So I love what you're setting it up. This is fascinating this way. Moneyball is a great movie. For the listeners that haven't watched Moneyball, do you want to just give a quick synopsis of what that movie is about? Is it about a money that's rolled up as a ball? What exactly are we talking about?
Not exactly. It's a great movie. It's one of my favorites. So basically, this was set around there's like 1999, 2000 timeframe. Oakland A's. They just don't have a budget for players. And they were losing great players one after the other, Jason Giambi being one of them. And they were trying to get creative and figuring out how they were going to replace them. And Billy Beane just happened to be at a meeting where he was trying to negotiate a trade, and he got told no, but he noticed a guy in the back of the room is played by Moneyball's Jonah Hill, who was the guy they were listening to. And everything, can I have this guy? No. Can I have this guy? No. And it was all coming from the Jonah Hill character, his brain. So his philosophy was, we're paying attention to too many numerical stats when there are a lot of undervalued players out there that if we just focus on one stat, we could build a championship team, and we could do it on the cheap. You know, instead of paying somebody, you know, $100 million contract, you could get a guy for $237,000, which is still about $200,000 more than what he's making right now. So, and they did build, not the championship team, because they did lose, I think, I don't remember if it was the Yankees or not, but they came really close, and they did build a great team. And of course, they're leaving Oakland now, right?
I think so. Yes.
Yet another team going to Vegas, I'm guessing.
Hey, what happens Vegas, I guess, needs to stay in Vegas or come to Vegas. I don't know, maybe
Or
more.
they go to Vegas, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But, you know, with Billy, you know, he went to his coaching staff and was really kind of challenging them to look at things differently. You know, he kind of goes in and he says, what's our problem? And nobody really knows what the problem is. And, you know, one guy says, with all due respect, we've been doing it this way for a really long time. Like, why don't you just let us do what we know how to do? And thankfully, he did not listen to them, and he went out on his own and found this Jonah Hill person. And I apologize to the statistician. It's a real name. So sorry, but that was smart that he looked at them and said, no, we're not going to do it the way we've been doing it, because it's not working. Yes.
So have you seen that happen? I'm curious before, and I'm probably detracting for us getting to the meat of this, but you raise a really good point. Have you seen, in all of your years of supporting medical affairs like you have, how often do you feel like that this is applicable to the conversations when we're thinking about metrics for medical affairs, right? About, well, this is the way that we do it. This is how we've measured things. Don't really know of another solution, so therefore we're just going to keep giving what they're asking for. Would you say it's there's a lot of things that are very relatable in that scenario as well too, beyond just the stats themselves?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of things that pharma does because that's the way they've always done it. I mean, just like we were talking about last month or whenever it was about having the MSLT presentations and interviews. I mean, why are we still doing that? So, while it seems like we're trailing off here, I want to go ahead and keep with our program of going over some of the key takeaways. And instead of telling everyone what you are going to learn, I'm putting it back on you guys. So the key takeaways I'm going to share are questions I want you to ask yourself after listening to the past couple of podcasts. You know, we're talking about quantitative and qualitative KPIs, right? But we expect these metrics to tell a story. Quantitative metrics, they can't tell a whole story. So one of the questions I want everybody to ask themselves is, you know, what is the story you want your quantitative and qualitative metrics to tell you? Because they have to be telling you something. And then the second one, I mean, I think you got to be honest with yourself here, but are the KPIs that you're using now aligned with the organization's core goals? And these are the people that you guys, as MSL directors, are answering to. You know, are you getting the answers from these numbers?
This is gonna be good.
I hope so. So since we are kind of talking about baseball, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, because I know you played baseball in high school.
Good memory. Yep, good memory.
Anyway, when you think of a batter's stats, you know, they've
Yes.
got lots of stats for batters. And thinking in terms of what we're talking about here, what do you think is the most important stat we probably are recording?
The most important stat that is being recorded, or the one that's being reported the most?
You know, we record all kinds of stats
Yeah.
for batters. What's the most
Okay.
important? What's the one that tells, what is the one that tells the better story?
Okay. All right, let me throw you a curveball then. Have you ever heard of
Curveball, I like that.
OPS?
OPS. I have a baseball player child, so that's on base percentage plus slugging.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
So, all right, I'm impressed that you are not only just a loud mom at a baseball field, but you actually have educated yourself on the game in different ways. Tell us about what OPS actually is then. How would you define it? Or
Okay,
how do you
so,
define it? Yep.
well, there is a formula, and that's asking too much of me, but it is it's the percentage of time that a player gets on base, whether it's being walked or, you know, hitting and getting on their own way. And then the slugging includes how many bases they get. So if they hit a double or a triple, obviously their OPS is going to be higher than if they just hit singles or if they just get walked.
So, for the listeners, I know we're staying on baseball with a lot of theme, but typically the major average that you'll see is the batting average. That's when you're watching TV, etc. Basically, the amount of times a batter gets a hit and gets on base is really that factor in that. But to Mary's point, this OPS actually looks at more context beyond just did they get a hit or not? Did they score runs in the process of that? Did they convert to runs? How many bases did they get, et cetera, too? So it's more it provides greater context or a more inclusive story, if you will, about their overall performance as a hitter. So OPS, yeah, that's the one I would go with, Mary.
So then why do you think companies are only measuring batting averages and putting the most value on people's batting averages instead of the OPS?
Several reasons I would say that come to mind. One would be there's comfort and familiarity. Changing the norm is hard and difficult, especially when it requires new systems, maybe even. How do you reconfigure things? But I think the first thing is, what is it that we have to ask our question first? What is it that we're trying to understand? What's our ultimate goal? Okay, now how can we measure the goal that we're trying to achieve? So I think we have to start there first and see, do we have things that can measure what it is we're hoping for? And then if not, what are ways that we can get there? Are there systems? I would say now with AI, I would say all of these platforms now, there are ways to tell stories. I think we've become reliant on the data to tell the entire story. And that's where the pitfall is, because you see the entire story is limited with the data that we currently capture, right? So it's this very circular type of thing. So I think that's kind of been one of the reasons to do that. And it's a big investment, and it's but to Moneyball's point, they have nothing to lose and everything to gain. And it just takes that one person from leadership that's going to give the green light to be able to think differently, and empower your people to think differently, to create those types of processes too. So that's where we need to get. That's the challenges of why we kind of stay stuck. I think there's a few of the reasons why we stay stuck, but I think there's so much opportunity to really kind of move things forward.
It's because, you know, it's easier. You know, change is hard, but I think sometimes change of anything, you just tell yourself, I acknowledge that the change is hard, but I acknowledge it's going to be worth it. I don't know.
Are they in an environment that if there's a freedom to fail, right? I think that part of that comes with the
That's the
philosophy of the
psychological safety
organization.
again.
Yeah, psychological safety. You're right. You have to. Are you hiring smart people and letting them tell you what to do or bring ideas to the table? Are you giving an environment to be able to do that? And being okay if it doesn't, as long as we're failing forward, I guess is the terminology, right? So there's multiple reasons of why things aren't, but there's many ways where we can we can make that no a yes. But it does require some of the a philosophical understanding that these changes may fail, and that's okay, but we're learning from those. That's what data is supposed to help us do, is to help learn from the things that we're doing.
So I asked my son, my favorite baseball player on earth, by the way, Liam. I said, if there was a baseball stat that he thought served absolutely no analytical purpose, you know, meaning we track it, but we don't do anything with it. And he said, well, I'm going to let you see if you can guess. I asked Lawrence this earlier today too. If he had a guess as to what stat that was.
I don't know. Tell me.
He said pitcher wins and losses. And the reason he said that was, he said, if you're tracking a stat that's intended to tell a story, he didn't use that phrase, but I'm just going to use that because he's 16 and he probably would not say that. But it doesn't tell you anything that you need to fine tune in the pitcher's performance. It's just comparing one pitcher to another. And I'm just thinking, because I know there are organizations like this out there, that they rate their MSLs on a bell curve. So are we rating MSLs against each other on a bell curve on their pitcher wins and losses? I don't know. Again, I'm full of rhetorical questions today.
Yes,
no
you
solution, guys. You got to figure it out yourselves, but you know.
That's well, and also, I mean, if you even dig deeper into that, number one, you've got a very smart kid. So congratulations to that. Wins and losses, when you're that should be more reflective of the team's work of a game, not just the pitchers, right? So the pitcher could have an amazing game where he allows one run, and his team doesn't score any. So he gets the loss in that scenario. One run, if you think about an earned run average, is extremely low. It's a great performance. If you are just looking purely at the number of wins and losses that pitcher has, that's not reflective of the quality of work that he does. That's the result of the quality of work, but it's not the quality of work. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So not only does that not tell you anything, it like negative tells you things. Like
it's a misrepresentation.
Stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Very interesting. Yeah. Like a pitcher throws a no hitter. That's not the same as a complete shutout, right?
That's right. That's right.
I mean, no, like, or
they're both great. They're both great, right? they ultimately lead to your team being better. There's no doubt about it, and your individual contribution to that. But I mean, that doesn't, there could be unearned runs. I mean, we could go all, there's tons of different ways we could show the correlations to this, but the reality is they're there to help support, or like you said last week, they're diagnostic tools to help us understand, but it doesn't tell the whole story.
I'm curious, because one of the candidates I'm working with recently sent me her annual review. And I was impressed with her average length of interaction. And when I said that to her, she was like, really? So maybe I'm misguided, but what do you think is a good average length of interaction?
One that makes an impact on the provider and is
No, I'm
able
talking
to.
about in time. We're on quantitative right now.
No, I know, but here's the problem with that, right? How is that number reported? Okay, there's a couple of different ways that it's done. It's either
Okay.
self-reported by the MSL, or maybe it's captured in Viva when you're running a presentation, it actually tracks the time that, I mean, not all companies do it, but could track the time, like how much time is spent on a slide or this, that, and the other to give an understanding of that. The problem with that is when that becomes the measure or the expectation, that doesn't account for those. I'll answer your question. Let me answer your question.
You are okay.
Typically 30
Answer the
minutes.
question.
30 minutes to an hour, typically kind of what MSLs or we talk, that's one of the qualitative components we try to stress to really differentiate ourselves between commercial and medical is we might not have as many meetings, but our meetings go deep. We talk about a ton of stuff, or we learn this, that, and the other. Again, we don't tell what we learn, but we don't have a form of capturing that and really bubbling that up to the top. It's more about the length of time. It all goes back to that quantitative component. What I would say is the average is probably 30 minutes maybe, but that doesn't account for the virtual space where time is limited now because you've got so many meetings that are crunched in. Maybe you can only get 10 minutes with the provider. Maybe that's how they'll respond to you. That could be a great 10 minutes though. The challenge is the previous year, if you're tracking year to year, and then your time goes from 30-minute average to a 15-minute average, what does the thought process automatically go to? Either, oh, well, my MSL is not as valued as much, or the life cycle of the product means that MSLs aren't needed as much. I mean, you just start going down this slippery slope, right? So it could be a great conversation with the hire or the director, but as far as reporting the overall success of a team, it's difficult when you leave it in that way. That's the danger with that. It usually is a great thing to shine, but if you're comparing year to year, that's where you find yourself in potential trouble.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of that. Well, the person I was speaking of, her average interaction time was 54 minutes.
It's fantastic.
Really good. But apparently her leadership didn't think that was all that good. Or not, they didn't think it was bad, but they didn't think it was as phenomenal as I thought it was. But, I mean, because that's an average. I mean, because that means sometimes she's meeting with somebody for 2 hours and sometimes somebody for 20 minutes. I think as an average, an hour, almost 54 minutes, that just seems crazy to me.
So tell me, Mary, let's go down that road. What if you were putting a candidate forward? Which do you think would be more impactful to a hiring manager? In that same scenario, the candidate says, in my average engagement with a provider, I was able to gain 7 insights aligned to our strategic imperatives for our organization, aligned to our medical affairs strategy, or something like that, versus the amount of time with? Which one would make more impact? Which one do you think would be like, oh, okay, this, I know that the quality of the conversations are much more meaningful and create scientific rapport. Which one would you go to in that scenario if you had to pick one?
That is an eye-opening question. Because, you know, whenever I submit candidates to one of my clients, I write up basically my story, my interview of the person. And everything I talk about is qualitative. Qualitative, God, I don't know how I keep mixing those up. It's
That's
qualitative.
okay. That's okay. That's what we do as
You know,
industries. We mix those up. We mix them up because they're interchangeable, unfortunately. Go ahead.
But, you know, I may have talk about their impact or their involvement in supporting company-sponsored trials or their launch lead initiatives and things like that. I never once said this person was on their review, had the most interactions of anybody on their team. And that is such an interesting question. That is a really good point. That one's gonna have me thinking for a while. Okay, so I'm gonna put it back on you again.
All right.
Because you keep hitting me with these pearls. Let's see what you got for this one. Okay. I want you to think about, you know what, the top MSL on your team.
Okay.
And, you know, I don't want the person's name, but when you think of this person and you think they're the best MSL on your team, why do you think that? What is it about them that makes you think that?
They have a clear understanding of who it is that they're engaging, the needs of that person, the interest of that person, that they know how to connect and they know how to be the scientific bridge to our company. It's custom made for, they take something that is a strategy for all and customize it specific to the person they're engaging. I mean, I guess that's probably the easiest, that's the most brief response I think I've ever given, Mary.
Absolutely. And I can't believe I'm actually going to ask a follow-up question. Okay. So you have somebody on your team like this, that's pretty freaking awesome. But so they can take the strategy that's been explained to them. And they, I guess, intuitively, maybe they've kind of got a business acumen and know how they're reading their people that they're interacting with. And feel like you said something about going into, I was making notes while you were talking, that they're prepared. Like they have objectives when they go in. Absolutely none of that can be measured with a number. On its surface. So if you were going to quantify that, how would you? Because I think that's way more important, that you have somebody that when they go in to see a thought leader, this is what they go in with, and you can imagine what they come out with.
You know how small pharma is. Well, that's very similar as well. Even in these circles that we run in with these thought leaders, they're in connection with one another, or someone across our company is in connection with them all the time as well too. Great experiences travel fast, right? So if the whole Maya Angelou, I don't remember what they say as much as how they made me feel. You're going to communicate that with others that are connected with that person as well too. So that's one way that could be measured, and is you're having people internally that are bragging on you. You have those in their network that are bragging on you. Opportunities are coming. They're connecting you with their network. That's another example. You're able to build off of those experiences to be able to go out and educate others. Opportunities come as a result of the interaction that you have. So that would be a way, the things that I would be looking for that are above and beyond just an interaction is what's the so what that came from this? So part of that is just training the teams of what it is they need to communicate in above and beyond. If you don't have a system that's set in place to do that in your one-on-one conversations, hey, tell me about some things that went really well, just like you would say about the things that are challenges as well too. Those are your opportunities to collate that information and make sure that that's being brought forward within the organization. So that's the part that I would look for. That's a way to get that sense. You run into them at congresses. You do it in field rides as well too, right? So that's your way of being able to QA some of the things that you're hearing from your MSLs or that they're reporting.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about something you said in the last podcast.
Oh,
I listen. And it applies to, what you just said about your MSL. You have to know what your end goal is. You have to communicate that to the people who are feet on the ground, boots on the ground. But it's not just knowing what the goal is. It's coming together and figuring out how you're going to achieve it and work backwards.
that's right.
You gotta know. One of my mentors used to say, you have to have a roadmap. Like, you may know you want to drive to Chicago, but if you just take off, maybe you'll get there, maybe you won't, but you have to have a plan. You have to know what steps are going to get you on that journey. So, all right. I got more baseball comparisons for you.
Okay.
And this was something, so Billy Beane notoriously did not watch the games. He might watch it on TV, or he might be like down in the workout room on the treadmill but he would not watch it from the field.
Okay.
Until a little bit later on into this journey. And he wasn't the team manager, he wasn't like the baseball coach guy. But since this whole thing was his baby, he did eventually go and watch the games from the field. So I thought field was a really good word to use because, it translates well to this, so I've known MSL directors who their job was they just sat behind their desks and counted the numbers, and that's it. And first of all, I don't think that's a good look for trying to gain the respect of your team. But being able to witness firsthand how your MSLs are interacting, that's, I think, a way you can qualitatively measure them. I hate to even say measure, but how often do you think a director or an MSL leader should be with their teams to be able to witness firsthand how they interact?
I think every situation is different. I would say as a rule, probably once a quarter, depending on the team size, depending on what you have going, depending on the life cycle of the product, depending on the import of who the KOLs that are being engaged as it applies to the rest of the business. There's different scenarios, but as a rule, I would just say once a quarter. I think it's enough to know and understand the support that's needed and where things are working well, where things are not. I think at the same time, we have to trust people to do their job, and we're paying big time salaries for very educated people that we need to be able to understand what they're doing, but at the same time, we need to give them the freedom to be able to operate in the way that is most successful for them. So now, if someone's onboarding, that could be a different scenario. If there are things that may be identified through one-on-one conversations or whatever that might require additional support, And so that could vary, but I would say probably once a quarter, I think would be kind of the standard approach that I would take.
Okay.
But let me clarify. Let me
Yes.
add a little bit more. Doesn't mean that that's my only touch point with the MSL as well too, right? So for example, one-on-one conversations, which could happen weekly, bi-weekly, maybe once a month, just depending on maybe a certain if they're a principal MSL, they've been at this for a long time, and they're actually leading others. Maybe it's a different scenario. But based off those conversations and what I'm learning in those conversations also informs how often or the need to be able to go out. If I'm not seeing insights that are coming in that are really aligned to the strategy, if I'm not seeing some of these things that might need some more training or support, that might lend itself to me wanting to be out there in the field more often than not. But as a rule, I would say it's support.
If we only track the number of interactions, you have no way of knowing, well, not, you don't have no way, but if all you care about is how many, if the person just looks at the top line, how many interactions did you have this month or this quarter, whatever? And maybe there's an important institution this person's not going to because they, whatever reason, I hit on my numbers, so I don't need to go to Stanford too. That's where I think a quantitative metric is really hiding some things. And then also, you know, let's say in the scenario, it's not that the MSL is struggling to get access to Stanford. Maybe it's like what you just said, which is, you know, we have other activities going on with Stanford. They, like our clinical trials group is, you know, or our medical director spending more time with these people, our MSL doesn't need to be there. So that's how the numbers don't tell the whole story.
Agreed.
Yeah. So it's not always about having the most data. It's about having the best data that you can. So this is interesting. This is actually something I thought about last night. And actually made a note to bring it up, but I wasn't sure if we're going to go there. But so I think we do the royal we measure MSLs against each other. Not all of us, but many of us. And if you're working just oncology, just because it's easier. If your region is New England, you've got like tippy top KOLs in your region. If you are working
Arkansas, you can
when I
say.
throw out some states, because I don't want to offend anybody.
Okay.
And I'm sure I'll offend somebody. But if you're working in another region in the country where you have mostly community.
White space, more white space areas.
Yeah, maybe a lot of white space. And you don't have KOL. Like, I mean, the term KOL has become very bastardized, let's be honest. Because that we now call people local KOLs. And I mean, we're talking about their sphere of influence. They're influencing their people in their local area. Who's influencing them? You know, their regional KOLs and the national KOLs and the global KOLs. You know, so KOLs has become interchangeable with HCP.
Mhm.
But you know, let's just say what kind of, I mean, part of what an MSL is supposed to do is to provide this education and awareness to the KOLs so they can in turn go influence other people, because since MSLs can't influence. And what if their sphere of influence is not that big? Then if we're talking about prescriptions, the person that's covering that New England region is the impact's gonna be more felt up there than it will be in like a smaller, less prominent thought leaders, white space, whatever. I think it's hard to measure those folks against each other. I mean, it took me a long time to get there, what I was trying to say, so it is hard to evaluate MSLs against each other when we need to be able to differentiate the value brought from one region versus another, where the most influential thought leaders may or may not be located. How are we measuring the success of an MSL who covers a region that's full of top KOLs against someone who has very few true national thought leaders in the region? Because that's almost unfair too. I mean, is there some sort of unspoken, we'll cut you some slack because you're not you don't cover Houston?
Goes back to your objective for medical affairs. And that sounds so simple, but it really does. I mean, what is our ultimate goal? I would say, again, I think I said it earlier, our ultimate objective is to improve patient outcomes, right? So I think that that's the shift that you're seeing. At least I've seen it, the trend be, instead of, the reality is, while there are a handful of top thought leaders across the US, the reality is they don't see all the patients. They may write certain things and guidance, but it doesn't mean that that's what actually happens in clinical practice too. So I think we have to first ask the question, what is it that we're here for? What's our ultimate objective? If we decide that it's on patient outcomes, okay, then it's all right, how do we prioritize that within each region and do our best to standardize that? It could look at a variety of different ways. It could be whether it's having a database of going to clinicaltrials.gov and seeing everybody in your TA and trials that they've done. That can be a way of standardizing things. That's consistent across the US. Could be hospital systems. It could be academic institutions, all these different things. There are some things that you can definitely standardize with that. You could easily say in that same scenario, it's more difficult. I have to travel a much further distance in the white space area to go see a thought leader. So it's much more difficult to do that. It's easier to be in Boston and be a stone's throw away from all the different people. There's so many different opportunities to connect, right? So it's all how you view it out of your lens. They're not, while there could be some differences, there's enough similarities to kind of standardize that, I think, if done the right way.
Yeah, that's probably another can of worms for
Probably
another fishing trip. But yeah, I don't think we solved all the world's problems here, but I think we accomplished the point of the takeaways, which is, we want people to ask themselves these questions. What is the story I want these KPIs to tell?
yes.
Am I getting the whole story? And then the second one, are these KPIs telling us how aligned we are with accomplishing the big goal of the organization?
I think it goes back even further than that. We have to ask our questions. What is our ultimate thing that we're trying to achieve? Once we determine what that is, okay, what are some ways that we can assess that? And then how do we need to communicate it? I think that those are kind of the essentials that we have to first start with. Instead of trying to find tools to solve a problem, we understand what problem it is that we're trying to solve. Instead of just saying this doesn't work, what is it that we want to be able to do first, and then let's figure out. I mean, good night. We have so many bright minds in medical affairs. What would it look like if we all focus on this and try to find a path forward? It's only going to take one or two people that are going to be bold enough to give it a shot. And I'm excited to see if there are some out there that are willing to do that and maybe get something published. Who knows? Maybe we could have them on our podcast at some point.
Yeah. And you just bring it back to Billy Bean, what is the problem? We've got to think differently to try to fix it. So thanks for having this discussion with me today, and let me trail off into my baseball metaphors. It's been fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing how everybody kind of answers their own questions, how the MSL leaders look at these things and think, am I happy with the way things are? Or do I want to accept that there's a challenge out there? Maybe we got to look at things a little bit more.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. Thanks for leading the conversation today, Mary. It's always good to connect with you about these deep thoughts that are always on our minds. I love the bobblehead doll too. I think we need to get one that shows you and I. What do you think?
It's gonna be me giving you a noogie.
I deserved it. I'm sure.
Yeah. I'm looking at the other ones I have. I have a Nolan Ryan. I have an Adrian Beltre right here.
Look at you.
These are the ones they give away at the games. It's got his golden glove right here. I mean,
How about let's talk about the Razorbacks real quick. Number one team in baseball right now. Just swept LSU.
I can't hear you.
Hmm.
But you know what's funny about this bobblehead of Adrian Beltre? He notoriously does not like people touching his head. See?
Yeah. Thanks so much to everyone for listening in today. Where leaders develop other leaders, we continue to learn a lot from you. The feedback that you give us, not only on the podcast, but then the different comments and the different things that we post on our page. Be sure to follow if you have not on MSL Lead Chronicles on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great one. Look forward to the continued conversation.